Hi guys, before we head over to the show, I'd just like to say that if you enjoy the content that I produce here and want to help support the show, for $2 a month, you can get ad-free episodes on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Heavy Metal Tones. I'm also available on all streaming platforms and on YouTube. Please do head over to either one of those to support the show. If you feel so inclined, please do email me at heavymetaltones@gmail.com. That's heavymetaltones@gmail.com, where you can request, show ideas, album reviews, interviews, and so on. Otherwise, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Until we got AT&T Business Internet, we used to have a guy sleep at the warehouse. His only job was to reset the router overnight when the internet would cut out. If he missed it, we missed orders. One time, he operated a forklift while sleepwalking. One should never sleep fork. Now we have AT&T Business Internet. It stays up so Dave can lie down at home. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, AT&T Business.
AT&T Business Internet. Connecting changes everything.
Geico presents a 30-second podcast between your podcast. Today's story is shared by one of our listeners. It's called Betrayed by Bill. It was in that moment I caught who was staring back at me in betrayal, or more like what? My insurance bill. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and switched to Geico, saving about $900 in the process, and never to be betrayed again. Now that was bloody riveting.
It feels good when the story ends with savings. It feels good to Geico.
There you are. Come on in, mate. Come on in. Welcome to Heavy Metal Arms, the local on the corner, for you to enjoy a nice cold brew, a nice meal, chat with your friends, and listen to some fantastic pub rock. It's 1976, at the height of the pub rock era. You've got some fantastic bands, and every pub you go to, they're doing great covers, releasing good singles. They're just there, plonking away, rock and roll at its very best. Some of my finest and favourite tunes are played across the stage here at, as I said, the Heavy Metal Arms. Now, today on the venue, on the stage, we have the one and only Eddie and the Hot Rods. Yes, Eddie and the Hot Rods. One of those bands that you may have never heard of, but around these parts, Squire, very, very popular. And that's a fact. Everyone loves Eddie and Hot Rods around here. If you don't, I'll set the Piranha Brothers on you, Doug and Dinsdale. They'll sort you out, they really will. I'm only joking. Come and stay and listen to this brilliant band. Now, Eddie and the Hot Rods. Let me tell you a little story about them. Sit down. Let me pour you a beer. And one for ladies, let's not forget them. Bloody hell, Harry, I forgot the crisps. Chuck us a couple of packs of salt vinegar, will you? What, you only got cheese and onion? You'll be like, chuck us the cheese and onion. I can't have a beer without a crisp, now, can I? Now, anyway, are we ready to go? Hang on, let's open the crisps first. Oh, this is going to sound terrible. Come on, hurry up. Hey, Harry, these are stale, mate. What do you mean? They're stale. That's as bad as your beer. But hey, don't start on me, mate. Don't you? What? Hold on. I've got to tell a story. Well, you can't throw me out, right? I've got things to do. Welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with your podcast host, Tony Evans. Oh, gosh. Now, I've been just chucked out of the pub, as you can hear. Now, no crisps were harmed in the making of this recording. I can't count for the drinks, but there was no crisps harmed. And Harry's beer and Harry's crisps are not stale. They're very lovely. I highly recommend the Heavy Metal Arms, just on the corner down here. It's not a bad place to be on a Friday night, actually. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, that's right. Before I got rudely chucked out, now I'm going to miss the band. Well, we might as well find somewhere quiet and sit down and have a chat. Oh, here you go. That's a little park bench. It's a bit chilly, but, it won't be very long. So come and sit down beside me. Sorry about you getting chucked out there, That Harry, he can be a bit temperamental, a little bit temperamental, a bit of a curmudgeon, unfortunately, but no rock and roll in his soul. That's what I keep saying to him. Anyway, where were we? Who are Eddie and the Hot Rods, you might ask? Those that don't know this is the episode 4. of the 50 years of punk, 1976 to 2026. We've already done 999, X-Ray Specs, Stiff Little Fingers, and now we're going to look at Eddie and Hot Rods. And the reason I chose Eddie and Hot Rods, guys, girls, boys, and all, is that this, for me, is the missing link. They consider the missing link. They are to rock punk music what Darwin was to the Beagle. Okay, so they basically straddle the two sounds and bring the effervescent rock and roll sound of the UK pub rock scene, which echoed across the world in lots of places. I don't know about the US, but I know in Australia here, the pub rock scene was pretty big. Bands like Dragon and Rose Tattoo, and bands like that. Bands that were not quite big enough to fill stadiums, not quite big enough to fill a big venue, but on a Friday night, Saturday night, and a Sunday night, you would get them playing on the stages on every pub across this wonderful fair continent, and of course across the UK. Very much a big scene in London. There were a lot of bands that were sort of bubbling around then. Of course, you had Kilburn and the High Roads. You had Eddie and the Hot Rods, as we mentioned. You've got Dr. Feelgood, right? You've got all these kind of bands that sort of went on to spawn bands like Iron Maiden, and actually helped sort of push the envelope of the new wave of British heavy metal. Now, people might sort of push back on that and say, no, Tony, I don't think they did. But I genuinely think the whole pub rock scene helped grow the live scene in the UK, particularly in the mid 70s. Now, why is the Eddie and the Hot Rods the missing link, you might ask? Now, at that point in time, in 1975, when the band formed, it was still that bubbling, effervescent rock and roll bands that were copying, doing cover versions, most likely, or a lot of them are cover versions. A lot of Johnny B. Good, a lot of Elvis, a lot of rock and roll, a lot of Haley's, the Comets, and so on, and things. So there was lots of things like that. They were doing covers of the Who. They were doing covers of '60s rock bands. So to fill the stage, because punters wanted to hear lively music. They wanted to play lively music, so that they didn't have as much a large repertoire as they possibly could. So they filled it with covers, right? And they made this sort of free chord, mad sound out of the tunes they did write themselves, and the way that they also sort of hyped up and sped up and amphetamized. Is that the right word? Amphetamized. No, I can't even think of it. Amphetamized. Let's stay with that. The music. So we got the sort of UK's version of, say, the Ramones or Iggy Pop, or not that, but it was more because it was in a pub situation. It was depending on the pub you're in and the area you're in. It depends on the kind of rowdiness you got from it. But Eddie and the Hot Rods, so 1975, there they are, banging away, right? They're formed in Canvey Island in East London, in Essex, sorry. And so they're sort of that sort of whole Cockney, knees up Mother Brown, kind of real McCoy. My favourite people in all of the world, all of the UK, particularly in London, are Cockneys, are the EastEnders. My family are all EastEnders, and so there's a real sense of honesty, even though some of them will be blind before you've even turned the corner. That's everywhere, right? But there are a lot of cheeky chappies, right? A lot of barra boys, a lot of sense of life and fun is what the EastEnders have. Unlike that terrible, awful program on the BBC, EastEnders, where it makes out that we're all dour, sad, boring, grey, miserable people, which is not the case. The band themselves were formed in Westcliff-on-Sea in Essex, as I said. Essex, I thought it was Canvey Island, connected around Canvey Island, in 1975 by guitarist Dave Higgs, who had previously played in The Fix. Now, I only have one single by The Fix, and for the life of me, can I remember the name of the single? Probably not. I just remember it has a pair of legs in stockings and suspenders and stiletto shoes, and I think that's what made me buy the single when I was probably 14. Who knows? Okay. With drummer Steve Nicol, bass Rob Steele, and singer Barry Masters. Now, Barry Masters is the pivotal, well, along with one other member we'll talk about in a minute, pivotal member of this band. Born in Rochford, Essex, on the 4th of May 1956, sadly passed away on the 2nd of October 2019 from drug-related um, mishaps, unfortunately. He had a very troubled life, but he was also he was a real cheeky chappy rock and roller, right? Now, the reason that he is pivotal to this band is that he, Barry, had a voice that was sort of went from, it could do the real kind of poppy stuff, which they were known for later on, but they also could do the punky stuff. He could do the great covers. He had a real rock and roll voice. He had a very, very engaging and entertaining stage presence. He knew how to control an audience. He knew how to, you know, whip up a fervent storm, how to get a froth out of an audience from a small space right through to a big space, right? He wasn't that old. If you think in 56, he was only 21 in 77. So he's not so far out of the age group like, say, the Stranglers were or UK subs were. Um, they weren't old rock and rollers jumping in on the energy of punk. These were still people of a certain age group that were uh, on borderline okay to be into punk bands, right? I mean, it sounds stupid, but there were, after a certain age in the 77, punk bands would look at you or punks would look at you in a funny way. Anyway, we've talked about that before. But before the rising to semi-stardom in 77, the Hot Rods underwent several changes in personnel. One of the first members to leave was Eddie. Now, I thought this was hilarious. Now, I thought, oh, Eddie? Who's Eddie? It turns out Eddie was a dummy that featured predominantly on the in the Hot Rods' early gigs and was discarded as the joke had worn thin. Otherwise, the band consisted of Barry Masters on vocals, Pete Wall and Dave Higgs on guitar, Rob Steele on bass, and Steve Nicol on drums. Ed Hollis's brother of Talk Talk, Talk Talk's Mark Hollis. Remember Talk Talk? Whole different thing. Became their manager. So there was a connection in the music industry already. And these pub bands, they had managers. They toured. They weren't just playing, the heavy metal arms, as I said earlier, or the Dog and Duck, or the Ferret and Parrot, or the Roger Me. It wasn't one of those. They did play from pub to pub, so they had, if they could get management, and clearly they managed to get themselves into a position where they had management. And in 1975, after building a live reputation, they secured a Saturday night residency at the Kensington in London. Now, I don't know where that is. Let me just quickly, while I'm on air, Google this. Here you go. It's a lost venue, sadly. It was 54 Russell Gardens, London, West 14. Opened in around 1973 and it closed in 1985. So that's really sad. In the early 70s, this was a jazz pub with live music 7 days a week. By January 73, it became part of the pub rock circuit with Dr. Feelgood and Eddie and the Hot Rods as residents. Other bands like Barnsley Schwartz, Kilburn and the High Roads, Kurzweil Flyers, Humphrey Littleton, and Morrissey Mullen. Now, I didn't mention bands like Kurzweil and the Kurzweil Flyers and Doctor. I did mention Doctor Feelgood. Kurzweil Flyers I forgot to mention. Brinsley Schwartz, another massive pub rock band. Anyway, that's where they had their residency. A little bit of history there chucked in for you. That's what you come for. This was followed in October by a joint residency at the 101 with the 101ers, which was, of course, the band that Joe Strummer was in at the time. The Nashville, the fantastic Nashville, the punk mecca, one of the places that they played a lot, the punks played a lot at in the 70s. They played alternative headlines in November. After positive press reviews of their live shows, they were signed by Island Records. A lot of bands on Island Records, the Slits were on Island Records. They're a good label, actually. They were originally had a lot of dub, reggae stuff, and Island jumped on that punk bandwagon like the rest of them did back in 76. By 1976, Lou Lewis, harmonica, and Paul Gray, bass, had replaced Wall and Steel. Now, Paul Gray is a really interesting character. Paul Gray has played with everyone and anyone. He played with Eddie and Hot Rods, The Damned, UFO, The Members, Johnny Thunders, He replaced Algie Ward for the album Strawberries, which I've talked about before, although I may not have done. Maybe I think I have. No, I haven't. I may have talked on a different platform about this particular thing. It was the assistance of Captain Sensible and Rat Scabies. He really was a big. They're big fans of his, and they went on to do it been onto the Black Album and Strawberries, as well as numerous singles and the Friday the 13th EP, which I really adore. Shortly after, he joined UFO and remained there until their split in 1987. There we go. And he was brief stints with Heavy Load, a Fast Eddie Clarke's Fast Way band. So he saw a connection to one of his heroes, which was Lemmy. So lots and lots. So he's been around. He's been on Nevermind the Buzzcocks in the UK. That's a TV program, a music comedy TV program, a quiz program. For those that don't know what that is, anyway. So fantastic connection with other parts of the world. So other bands. So you can see how it's all comes together at some time or another, right? He joined the band after answering an advert in the Southend Evening Echo. They had the hit singles they had with him were "Do Anything You Want to Do," which is on the second album. That's one of the big singles that he sort of recorded with that band. He was born on the 1st of August 1958 in Leigh-on-Sea. And at the moment he's playing and still active, which is amazing. Really, I love to hear that. But also joining the band was Keith Lou Lewis, 21st of April 1953, same sort of age group. Passed away sadly on the 6th of April 2021. He was an English harmonic player and vocalist who was a member of the Eddie and the Hot Rods before forming his own bands, influenced by the styles of Little Walter. He also guested on albums by the Stranglers and the Clash. So in Dr. Feelgood, he did a lot with his solo album on Stiff Records, which you can easily get on all streaming platforms wherever you worked with Jules Holland, Dr. Feelgood. As I said, he was on the Sandinista album by the Clash, which I actually didn't know. Black and White by the Stranglers, Stiffened Tears, the Ride Blue Divide, and interesting. And he also worked with Wilco Johnson as well on Bottle Up and Go, which is one of my favourites. Anyway, enough of those sort of little side notes. Let's get back to the band. So they do join the band. Lewis's tenure in the group lasted the release of their first two singles before he left. Now here's where the famous bit, the bit I found really interesting, comes together. I sort of knew this, but I didn't know without doing research if it was true or not. So with the new lineup, they then played at the famous London's Marquee Club, and I'd like to say that my band that I did roadie for used to play there a few times. I've been to that venue more times than I like to shake a stick at. Sadly, none of them exist anymore. There's no plaque even for it, so I won't go into that. I've already talked about that on the show before, and it really upsets me. Now, the opening act was Sex Pistols, which descended into chaos, with the Pistols smashing the whole Rod's gear. The Pistols support slot earned them their first music press review. So this is when they got the Pistols got their very first NME review, while supporting the then Eddie and the Hot Rods, after smashing up their equipment. The Enemy had made no mention of the headlining Hot Rods at all. By way of revenge, the Hot Rods claimed in the next week's edition of The Enemy to have sacked the Pistols from an upcoming tour, which The Enemy piffily described as what you get for mixing with real punks. During a residency at the club in the summer of 1976, they duelled for alternative weeks with AC/DC. Great, amazing. To see you could cram both bodies, see you could cram more bodies into the marquee. That was their little competition. He duelled who can get the most people into the marquee during one of the hottest summers on record. They first appeared in the UK singles chart at the end of the year with Live at the Marquee EP and the single Teenage Depression, which comes off the album, which we're going to talk about very soon. So we're leading up to the first album. The album that, as I said, is that Darwin-esque missing link, okay? After the release of Teenage Depression album, which marked their debut appearance in the UK albums chart, they recorded another EP, Live at the Speed of Sound, during the gig from which the EP was recorded. Graham Douglas, formerly of the Kurzel Flyers, mentioned before, joined the band on stage and jammed along, adding extra lead lines. Afterwards, his membership of the band was made permanent, and they set about writing and recording their second album. Well, this is as far as we're going to go, because he's going to talk about the first album. So the first album is Teenage Depression. It's not my favorite I'll be honest with you, it's not my favorite of their albums. It's the most important of their albums, one of the most important albums actually probably of the 70s, I would say, along with Nevermind the Bollocks. Big cool tone. I know, put your big pants on and listen to me. This is what I feel, my opinion. I think this is an extremely important album, okay? So I first came into contact with the Eddie and Hot Rods. I bought a second-hand record from a now long gone second-hand record store in Hendon Broadway, near the Central train station, on the right as you went up towards the War Memorial. Okay, I can't remember the name. It was owned by an old couple. They had so much records in there. I remember buying a few Mike Harding records in there, and would you believe it? I think I bought a Smurfs album when I was like 6, probably. I think. Anyway, it wasn't my brother bought it for me, I should say. My first actual album I bought, as I mentioned before, was the Who's Who by Number, the Who by Numbers. Anyway, Teenage Depression is the first album. I bought Life on the Line, which was their second album, both on Island Records. That charted better. Life on the Line, it got to 27. It's a lot more poppy, a little more radio friendly. A little bit of that sort of moving away from the real punky sound into a more sort of new wave sound, sort of. And then it got Thriller in 79, Fish and Chips in 81, and then that's after both. That one is on EMI, Thriller is on Island Records, so 3 on Island Records. EMI was Fish and Chips, and then after that, once the band split in 85, once Bernie left. In 85, you then get Gasoline, Better Late Than Never, Been There, Done That, 30 Years of Teenage Depression, and the last one, which was 4 years ago, which is Guardians of the Legacy. I'm not interested once Bernie leaves. I'll be brutally honest. He really was the face and persona of the band, and that's not having to go. Brilliant musicians, as I said, that are in the band, because they are really good musicians. I just, he's the one that, when I put it on, his vocal and his persona just grabbed me in such a way, right? So Teenage Depression, it comes out in 76. It reaches number 43 in the UK album charts. It has one of those sort of let's do it because everyone's doing it offensive punk album covers, even though they will probably tell you they are not a punk band. We know that they are. They are, because they straddle both sides of the line, because the line that they stand on is the death of pub rock and the birth of punk rock. It's a very difficult one. They all think they are pub rock because that's where they are raised, but they will also be recognized as a punk rock band because the style of music that is being played, the audience that grabbed it, the lyrical content, the cover of the album itself, and even the cover of the second album is Life on the Line, is also a little bit punky. So it's basically a picture of a guy hiding behind a car with a gun pressed to his head. He's about to take his own life. Okay, it's quite controversial as an album cover. It was. They say that it was based on picture of a man from a newspaper in America. He'd just robbed a bank and he was cornered by the police. And the press were there, and that picture was taken just before he blew his brains out. Now, it's distasteful. Let's be honest. Anything to do with that kind of thing is going to be offensive to someone, and I don't blame it. I don't blame them. What they've done is they've garishly coloured it like it's an Andy Warhol screen print. Now, in America, the American edition, which I have both the UK pressing and the American pressing. The American pressing has a much brighter cover on they've added brighter tones on the prints on the hand, the face, and the sleeve. Same album inside, of course. And again, this is where we get that: is it or is it not punk rock? Straddling those two lines across there. Musically, I think it absolutely is, because it's what I think of when I think of punk rock. Take out the extremes of punk rock, like the Pistols, like the Ramones, all right, and listen to the bands that were playing in around, and the Banshees and all that, early sort of art house stuff when it wasn't, take away the art house from from punk, which is a lot of it was in the early days an art movement. So take a lot of that art house away. Listen to the rawness of the music, the direction of the lyric, and the pace of the song, and you're gonna get what this is. This is punk rock, pub rock, right? This is really, it's not pop punk, it's not, goth. There's nothing like that. None of this. It's pure. It's punk. I think in its very purest form, outside of the Pistols, really is. Okay, it didn't do that well. Okay, it reached number 35 in the UK. 43 in the album charts, and the single track, the title track, "Teenage Depression," was featured in the 1979 film Rock and Roll High School. Okay, it also contains several cover versions. Now, this is very much a throwback to their pub rock heritage. Have they got enough songs to write an entire album? Probably not just yet. They will do going forward, but right there, right now, at that moment, they get signed by Island Records. That crest of a wave, that riding the cork that flies out of the bottle of punk in that spray of sweet music. What do they get? They think, we've got to fill an album out. We've had live EPs. We've got to fill an album out, and there are several tracks on these, which are live actually. I think they are also on the EP. All right. It was recorded at the Jackson Studios in Rickmansworth in Herefordshire. Those who don't know Rickmansworth is, if you are fans of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy like me, you'll know that the universe's worst poetry was made in Rickmansworth. Yeah. Anyway, a little side note to the greatest book ever written. Now, it is a hard-hitting R&B album with attitude, right? It's not going to hang around. It doesn't, like all great punk albums. It comes out of the gate, it slaps you in the face, it runs away, comes back again, and hits you again when you flip the album over. I'm not talking about the 2000 reissue with all the bonus tracks on. I don't want to go there. I'm just going to talk about the 11 tracks on the album that was released on the 22nd of November 1976, almost 50 years ago. All the songs are written by Dave Higgs, right? Which is, I thought Bernie would have written them. No, Dave Higgs written them. You've got "Get Across to You," "Why Can't It Be." We've got one of the covers by Joe Tex, which is "Show Me," "All I Need Is Money," "Double Checking Women," which I absolutely love. "Kids All Right," of course, by The Who. "Teenage Depression," the opening track. "Horseplay," "Wearer of the Schmaltz." Love that. "Horseplay," open brackets, "Wearer of the Schmaltz," close brackets. "Been So Long," "Shake," another cover by Sam Cooke, and "On the Run." All right. So the longest track on the album is 6 minutes 20 seconds. That's the ending track of the album. The shortest one is "Shake," 1 minute 30. They all sit around about the 2-minute mark, which is exactly what punk is all about. There's a high energy to this. It's like something the Damned would have done. So often people think that the Damned is that missing link, is that link between rock and roll and punk. It was the more accessible side of it. Yeah, the more radio friendly, the more understandable point of it. Whereas, the Pistols were there. They were always going to offend. They were always going to upset. They were always going to cause mayhem. Right? They were not music that your older brother would have liked. They're not music that your dad would have turned on. They would be music that they would have been banned in the house, as it was in mine. I remember it vividly. Okay, but bands like the Eddie and the Hot Rods had a sound that your older brother, if you've been raised in, say, in the 50s, in the 60s, is a sound that they would really probably enjoy. There's a lot of double stops, a lot of a hell of a load of Chuck Berry riffs ripped off, a lot of if you like Dr. Feelgood. Now, people say to me, but Tony, Dr. Feelgood is the missing link. I don't agree. I think Dr. Feelgood were doing a similar thing at the same time. It's like the way that um, the Saints in Australia and the Pistols releasing the same kind of thing at the same time without internet, right? Without word of mouth with such a distance. It was like this universal hive mind. It's the same with Dr. Feelgood and um, Eddie and the Hot Rods. The difference with Dr. Feelgood is Dr. Feelgood had been around a lot longer. They were from a very heavy blues background. They'd changed their sound on many a time. Whereas Eddie and the Hot Rods, they've come along, they've formed in 75, they've play a year or so, they hit playing with the Pistols, they see the ride of the Pistols. Now, they don't go and suddenly write political music, right? They don't go out and be the Pistols. They go out and they still write songs like I Can't Get Across to You, Why Can't It Be, All I Need Is Money, Double Checking Woman. The only song, I think, on the entire album that is controversial in any way is Teenage Depression. And I want to talk about that as a song because the Teenage Depression, it's an interesting suddenly out of time moment because back in 76, 77, around that time, the teenager was sort of looked on. It was a relatively new concept, right? The teenager sort of emerged in the sort of late 50s into the 60s, and at that point in 76, a teenager was still someone who was out. They'd left school, they were at work, they were borderline adults, and they were considered carefree because they were teenagers, right? They didn't have mortgages, weren't married. It was, they were listening to music, have a few pounds, a few quid, a few dollars in their pockets, and they were, sexually finding themselves sexually and morally and emotionally. The thought of them being depressive, I don't think was something that really, I don't remember. And again, I was only a youngster in the 70s, but I don't remember anyone really talking about that. And I don't think, to be fair, it was even something that the teenagers thought about. I mean, not this because there was depression, because sadly, teenage suicide has always been on the rise, always been there. Sadness and isolationism. Fathers at that time again, fathers that were from the war. A lot of time they were they come back. Well, grandparents had just come back from the war. There was a lot of starkness, a lot of anger, a lot of coldness, a lot of repression that was sort of coming out, and teenagers were riding that. But I don't think that it was already mentioned. So this is quite a brave song. If there's any other songs out there around that time about teenagers and depression that I don't know about, there might be subversive lyrics. This is this is a really rock and roll song, a really addictive single, a really sing-along song for such a dark subject. You also got to remember the single came out just before punk exploded, so it was new and exciting and different, and it was straddling a conversation that I don't know whether they meant it deliberately to be something to thought for. It was just a great lyric. Here's the lyric, right? Well, I'm spending all my money and it's going up my nose. My daddy's found me out and he's tearing up my clothes. My probation man says you know what you ought to quit. I said now don't you hang me up now and with none of that shit. So, even though he's 21, whoever's writing the lyric is writing it from that sort of like, that sort of 50s biker New York kind of rebellious teenager, talking about sticking stuff up his nose, amphetamines. I mean, street drugs were amongst the young were higher then than they are now, and they did a lot more for to you, I'm sure. Anyway, and then he got to the chorus. I got the teenage depression. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I mean, then you better look out. Look out. And it's got a double stop in it. Better look out, look out. It's fantastic. Same thing every day. Well, I can't get out of bed. Too many questions are confusing up my head. I can't stand the thought of another day at school, but I know the weekend's coming, so I've got to keep my cool. I got the teenage depression. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I mean, you better look out, chorus. It really makes me mad when they always ask me why, that I never comb my hair and I never wear a tie. School teacher bugging me, it's the same old thing. Get out of my way, I need another sort of shot of gin. I mean, I don't think I think it's just a rhyme, a rhyme with, it's just a good apt rhyme. I'm not sure any teenagers drinking gin. They might have been, I don't know. Anyway, it's it's a really catchy song. It's about the isolationness, the energy, boundless energy, and the risk taking of teenagers now and then. So it's a really forward thinking song. Great track. One of my favorites on the album, if not my favorite on the album. Brilliant single. Well worth if you've ever get to listen to the album, you think you'll find this song is one of the better ones. Okay, I think it's definitely one of the best songs on the album. But that's because that's a song that most of us have heard. If you have heard any best of punk albums, you're gonna hear Teenage Depression, right? Just like Life on the Line, the single from the second album. You'll know it as soon as you've heard it. But I like Double Checking Woman. Okay, Double Checking Woman. This is a real kind of sort of a bluesy Dr. Feelgood vibe song. It's like blues tracks on acid, right? It's a really interesting bastardization of all the things: pub rock, punk rock, even though it's pre-punk rock, and the blues, and a bit of soul in there. She's a smooth talking, cool walking, sweet looking, good looking, bed wrecking, hen pecking, always double checking up on me, yeah, checking up on me. So I love the way that she's a smooth talking, cool walking, sweet looking. It's the way that they uh, build that into that sort of Chuck Berry buddy buddy guy kind of double stop blues. It's almost Texas blues in some respect. Well, I feed her, I need her, I really, really love her. I never really love her because she's always double checking just to find the place where I've been hanging out. Yeah, where I'm hanging out. Yeah. So it's about not some trusting they a non-trusting girlfriend because they think you're going to be out there getting your leg over somewhere else. You're a double checking woman. Well, mate, you may have caused her to think there must be a reason why she's a double checking woman. Bed wrecking, hen pecking, sweet looking, good cooking. It These are Americanas, aren't they? These Americanisms. I can't imagine. I really mean this. Some, a boy from Essex singing or talking, sweet looking, good cooking, bed wrecking, hen pecking, always double checking on me. I can't imagine something they would say, right? They're geezers, right? The geezers. They're not going to be saying things like that. You're going to be like, get out of the way, woman. That kind of thing. I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying that's what they would be like back in the 70s, right? Anyway, one of my favorite tracks on the album because of it's a little bit longer. I like it's a completely different sound to anything else on the album, and it shows that how they can change uh, from one style to the other. Of course, the Kids Are All Right, which is a live version, a great version of the Who classic, perfect for a pop rock band, perfect for an Essex band, perfect for the Eddie and the Hot Rods, in my opinion. Absolutely. Shake, another one. It's a 60s pop song. Fantastic, quick, fast, good little cover. All right. But then you've got Horseplay, Wearer of the Schmaltz. Oh, I have to say, it's how do I say? What do I say about this song? Very hard to describe this song. This one's really dark, but in the way that it's sung doesn't come across dark. Okay, so Charlie Horse, right? It's basically about Charlie Horse or cocaine. Yeah, it's a term horseplay. I'm sure that's a term on play of where of Charlie Horse. Yeah, as in that's another term. Wearer of the Schmaltz. I don't know where that comes from, but Charlie Horse and horseplay. The lyric is about waiting in an alleyway to score some coke, and then not worrying about getting wet and sick because his flame is ready. Can't wait to get home and get that hit quick. Can't wait no longer. My stomach's getting sick. Flu-like flashes raise in my mind. The man keeps me waiting while my eyes go blind. It's a bit like something from the very much Tommy-esque, you know. I think that's where I'm getting. It's a bit of a Tommy-esque kind of track here. Everybody's mad for standing in the rain, but really doesn't matter because my mind is aflame. My man ain't coming. Candy got through. Got through. My mind don't work. No news get through. Running down the road, my legs are getting weak. The old lady's banging. I'm thrashing in my sleep. Everybody's mad, delayed in the rain. My man ain't coming. I'm dying in a pain. Oh, it's nasty, really. It says, it's about waiting for that fix, and he hasn't turned up. And you're all waiting so you can get your drugs from this one drug dealer, and it's raining, it's horrible, and the DTs are coming, and you're getting the chills. Horrible, horrible, um, kind of conceptual story, but it's not played that way musically. It's actually quite upbeat, really, interestingly wise. And I suppose it throws back to Bernie's drug addiction. I mean, he's when he passed away, it was under suspicious circumstances. Sorry. His neighbor found his body. His son did say that he often was a bit of a tomfool and a user of drugs, and he might have been like that his entire life. And this is just another way of mentioning it. Now, in the 70s, on a darker note, in the 70s, particularly in the later 70s, there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of recreational drug use, because there was a lot of poverty, a lot of unemployment, a lot of anger, bitterness, a lot of resent to the wealthy, and there was no way for a lot of these people to get out of their situation. It was either football, music, or drugs. And because you weren't getting the job you dreamt you wanted, you weren't getting the education to get the job you wanted, and you were told that you were useless and worthless on so many occasions. So teenagers back then, I mean, I remember my careers teacher, when I told him that I wanted to be a special effects artist, that's what I really wanted to be. They told me I would be a milkman. That's what they said. They said my aptitude test that I filled out, because when it said, "Do you smoke?" and I wrote in red pen, "Only when I'm on fire, miss." Um, for some reason, I don't know whether or not I got a caning for that. To be fair, but it was worth every stroke. Let me just say that. So every stroke. I laughed out loud when I was writing it, and I remember laughing when the teacher told it back to me. Anyway, that's what life was like. Okay, your parents, you've seen your parents do the 9 to 5. You've seen your parents, mum at home, miserable, looking after 4 kids, no way of expressing their own artistic needs and their own emotional wants and needs, just secondary to the old man who, would work 9 to 5, go to the pub after work, drink until he was drunk, waddle home, eat a cold dinner that was left in the oven while mum was asleep in bed, wake up with a hangover, rinse and repeat, do that 5, 6 days a week, even worse on a Saturday, okay? Give you a backhand when you ask for your pocket money, all right? And watch endless repeats of Bonanza on TV. Now, I'm not saying that's my life. There are aspects of that which is my life, was my life, I should say. But it sounds like a stereotype, but this is exactly what we were watching. This is what we were looking at, particularly us children who were artistic, us children who saw beyond the barriers of working for the coal board, or working in an office, or working sweeping streets that my father did towards the end of his life, his working career. Menial work. There had to be something beyond that. You know, we were putting on records with whatever money we could scrape together, and we were listening to things like Songs from the Wood by Jethro Tull. We were listening to Genesis and Pink Floyd and um, you know, Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and you know, Lou Reed and all these sort of people. You were listening to all this stuff, and you were mine was expanding with imagery outside of the 9 to 5er. And this is songs like this are really so on point. In fact, that's why I think this, again, one of the reasons it points directly at this being one of the true punk origin albums. The one that, you know, this is not scared, and it's not the only song on the album, not too scared to talk about this subject matter in a rock and roll way. You know, naming an album Teenage Depression, you knew it was never going to sell. It was never going to be platinum, right? Okay, you knew that record shops were going to ban it, which they did. You knew that record radio stations were going to ban it, which they did. You knew somehow, uh, but somehow I don't think they cared. You know, they just wanted to get across what they wanted to get across. They wanted to write it with fast, addictive, futuristic, yet also um, looking back over the shoulder to the past music. They wanted to crap as many chords and as much speed in as possible. They wanted, you know, speed is the operative answer. Speed up the nose and speed out the music, right? This is where they were coming from, and it was cheap and it was easy to get. I hate to say it, and it wasn't as it is now. You know, it wasn't as dangerous. It was dangerous, of course. It was all drugs are dangerous. I'm not condoning taking any drug at all, listeners. That's not where I'm coming from. What I'm coming saying is that back then, and I've said this before, and I'll say this again. You know, when my brother took LSD, he didn't go out and go to the out for a drink with his mates or go to a gig and, you know, whack himself out. He was the chair. He didn't get off the chair. He became the furniture. He was at one with the wooden framed, steel sprung Victorian armchair that sat in my lounge room. He was that chair, right? This is where we get to. So what does Bernie and the band do? They write songs, they get on stage, they express themselves musically in front of the same old audience, drunk, stoned, half the time not listening, chucking beer around, right? You know, smoke filled, noisy, working men's clubs and pubs, full of lads, lasses, you know, and the publican wiping the glasses and wishing that there was Val Dunican on his stage because he can't stand this modern nonsense. But he knows it pulls in the beer, okay, and it fills a stage and it makes his place a destination. And that's why the pub rock is so important. So important. In fact, I've not really talked about it as much. I've done an episode on it, but I genuinely think that the pub rock movement is one of those ones that one of the reasons why I think that music is stationary, still, uninventive, placid, bland, boring, you know, undirectioned, you know, all the adjectives that you want to use, okay, um, at these day and age, because there isn't that regular outlet in a place that anyone could turn up to. Yeah, there are bars that will play your underground music, but it's underground music. There is the emphasis, underground music. What pub rock was music that was for everyone because that's where people met. The cornerstone of society in Britain in the 60s and 70s and on into the 80s was the pub. Okay, they weren't all going there to get off their faces. They weren't all going there to just to blot out their thoughts. They were there. It was a place that you went. Firstly, it kept you warm. It was cheaper to be there than your own house. You can put your own fire on. B, you know, TV. There was crap on TV, so you go and talk to your mates. All right. You have a drink which made you feel more comfortable, relaxed. You got a place to have a smoke, um, have a meal, have a laugh, meet girls, meet boys. Although, to be honest, in the 70s, as most people know in the UK, there was a point that women drank in a separate bar. You had two bars. My dad's pub had two bars. It had the public bar and a private bar. The public bar, the beer was cheaper by 10 pence, but there was no carpet on the floor and the seats were ripped, and it was just a rough place. Whereas if you went into the private bar, the beer was more expensive. You got more choice of beers. There was carpets, there was nice seats, and it was non-smoking. Or they had smoking areas, if I remember my father telling me. So, but there were rougher pubs. There were pubs where everyone just joined together. Pubs in the East End, pubs in, North, all those sort of the smaller corner pubs, the ones that kept society moving along, kept people joined in together, had sing-alongs and music. I really genuinely miss. It's one of the things I miss about living in Australia, is we don't have that as thing. That's not something that is here. Now, people will say, "Isn't that a good thing, Tony? Alcoholism." Um, as I said before, we're not all going to the pub to get drunk. I mean, back in '76, when my older brother Andrew, and my older brother Michael were drinking, they couldn't afford it. They were on the dole. There was high unemployment. They would buy half a pint of bitter each, because lager wasn't a thing, and they would sit there and they would drink their half a pint of bitter, chat, and be part of the community, because there was no money unless someone bought them a drink. But the entertainment was always there. There was always a night where there was a band on, and you, if you were so inclined, could turn up. The publican would give you a quick audition. Yeah, mate, you're not too bad. On you get. And you just play. And it didn't matter if you knew 19 chords or 3 chords, because it was basically rock and roll, blues rock and roll, right? It was that truest of form that then became that truest of even more truer form of rock, the even more purest of the energy and fire of rock and roll, punk. And this album, all 11 tracks on it, including the covers, for me, ignite that. That is that missing link, and I really stand by whoever came up with that concept that it's the missing link. So I didn't come up with that. This was something I read somewhere. I thought, what a really clever way of describing this album. Again, it's not even my favorite Eddie and the Hot Rods album. The second one, Life on the Line, is my favorite album. But I have a deep soft spot. I wouldn't own 2 copies of it if I didn't like it, right? The American one and the UK one. In fact, I wouldn't mind getting an Australian pressing for it as well. That would be pretty good. But if I find it and see it there, or alternative cover pressings, and there are alternative covers out there, if I get a chance to get one, I will. That's enough for this week, guys. This has been a real entertaining ride for me. I really enjoyed this. I loved the little acting. I was being a thespian at the beginning of the show. So if it confused you, it probably confused me as well. Anyway, I enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed doing that. Time to go. Time to put the record on the deck and listen to some Eddie and the Hot Rods. Listen to Teenage Depression. I'm going to play it loud. I'm going to play it several times, and I'm going to put on Life on the Line. Why bloody not? And even maybe the third album, Thriller. Not sure I like it that much, but maybe I should go back and give it a go. Even Fish and Chips. The album Fish and Chips. I'm not... that sort of... Yeah, but we'll go. Hey, it'll always be Teenage Depression, and there'll always be Life on the Line. Thank you for listening to this series I'm doing this year. I really enjoyed it. It's one of those ones I look forward to doing once a month. So, we've still got, what was that, the 4th? We've still got 8 to go. Woohoo! Where do we go from here? Anyway, keep rocking. Keep looking after yourself. Like and subscribe. $2 a month. It will help me on Patreon. You don't get much for it. You get ad-free programs. Yes, that's really what it is. I can't lie to you. There's not much more. It just helps me keep the lights on. So if you really want to just don't care about the content too much, but do want to help me keep the lights on, keep the show going, because it is expensive and it does take time. $2 a month, Patreon. I'll put a link in the show notes below. Time, gentlemen, please. Last orders. Any last orders? There's a packet of crisps here. Someone's left it. Didn't want it. Cheese and onion. Otherwise they're going in the bin. Oh, all right. Well, going in the bin, I suppose. Bloody waste of money and time. I don't know.
Recently, our company softball team lost the big game by 1 run. Then Dale tried to console us with the quote, "Winning isn't everything." Dale's a loser. I play to win. Like early payout from Bet365. If my team goes up big, I get paid out instantly, even if they blow the lead later. Sound familiar, Dale? Bet365. Winning is everything. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. T&Cs apply. In-app only.